So imagine you're a teenage girl,
Right.
and you somehow survive a literal dragon attack in the late 19th century.
Which is already, a lot to handle.
A lot, yeah. But then you go on to make this completely unilateral choice to lock away a world-ending magical power. And then, and this is the wild part, you bind your soul to a castle for over a century as a ghost.
Right.
Just so you can dump that apocalyptic burden onto your deeply insecure, modern-day great-great-great-granddaughter. Welcome back, learner. Today we are doing a deep dive into something really special.
We really are. It's a fascinating look at invisible inheritances.
Exactly, because usually, when we talk about genealogical research, there's this expectation of precision. Like you find a birth certificate, you map out a family tree, draw these nice straight little lines connecting one generation to the next.
Right. It's supposed to be clean.
Yeah, you point to a specific ancestor and say, well, that's where you come from. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But today, our mission is based on this single, incredibly rich document called the collinsfamily.txt.
And let me just say, this document completely fractures that clean genealogical map.
Oh, totally. Because we aren't just tracking like eye color or who gets the family silver. We're tracking the inheritance of trauma. We're looking at the biological and really the spiritual residue of raw power.
Yeah, the silent sacrifices that just echo down through a bloodline. It fundamentally challenges the whole concept of free will, honestly.
It really does. So for you listening, I want you to think about how the unhealed wounds and the hidden triumphs of our ancestors literally shape who we become.
Are these people making choices, or are they just, playing out a historical script written by an ancestor they never even met?
It's a heavy question, and to answer it, we really have to look at the matriarch of this entire saga.
Right, the start of the script. Erin Rose Collins. Though actually, she was born Erin Rose Miller in 1875 in Salem, Massachusetts.
Which, the geography there is crucial. Oh, the geography and the timing are doing so much heavy lifting here. Salem in 1875. And the text specifically notes that she was born to a no-mage family, like completely non-magical parents.
Yeah, and the sociological context of being a no-mage-born witch in late 19th century Salem, you really can't overstate how intense that is.
Because of trials, right.
Exactly. The American magical community at that time was profoundly segregated from the non-magical world, way more so than over in Europe, and that's largely due to the cultural scar tissue of the Salem witch trials.
So for a non-magical family in that specific town, to suddenly have a daughter exhibiting magical abilities.
It wouldn't just be confusing for them, it would be existentially terrifying.
Right.
It triggers, centuries of buried cultural paranoia.
Okay, let's unpack this a little. The document does this brilliant job of grounding her so she doesn't just feel like a myth. It describes her physical traits in really sharp detail. Deep copper hair, hundy brown eyes, very freckled, pale skin.
You can just perfectly picture this kid.
Yeah. You can imagine her, sitting at a wooden table in Massachusetts, maybe accidentally making a spoon float, while her parents just look on in absolute horror. The text actually calls their reaction consternation and bewilderment.
Which necessitates immediate intervention. They had to step in. Enter the representative from Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
The magical extraction team, basically.
Pretty much. The arrival of that representative represents a total paradigm shift.
Oh.
To her parents, it's finally an explanation for the inexplicable.
Right, oh, we aren't crazy, she's a witch.
Yeah. But for Erin, it's an extraction. She's removed from this environment where she is a total anomaly and placed into one where she actually belongs. And at 11 years old, she gets sorted into Thunderbird House.
Which is so telling, because Thunderbird is famous for favoring adventurers.
Yeah.
Right? The sorting represents the soul of a witch or wizard.
Precisely. The Ilvermorny sorting is highly intuitive. If Thunderbird claims you, it suggests a baseline psychological resilience, a real propensity for confronting the unknown.
Which she's going to need.
Oh, definitely. It tells us that Erin, even at 11, possessed this innate fortitude. But, that fortitude is just completely weaponized against her just 4 years later.
Yeah, this is the part of the document that legitimately made me stop reading and just stare at the wall. Because by her 15th year, the text says Erin confides in an Ilvermorny professor that she's begun to perceive, and I quote, sights veiled from the eyes of others.
She's seeing invisible things.
Right. And imagine being a teenager, already an outsider in your non-magical family. You finally find your place at a magic school, and suddenly you start hallucinating invisible magic. And instead of taking her to, I don't know, the magical equivalent of a neurologist.
Or the school nurse. Yeah.
Yeah. They put her on a boat. They ship a 15-year-old girl across the Atlantic Ocean to transfer into Hogwarts, completely out of nowhere, simply because the new principal's deceased wife happened to have studied this condition.
Miriam Fig. Yeah. What's fascinating here is, well, it's actually incredibly dark. It is the ultimate commodification of a teenager.
Wait, elaborate on that, because, I mean, on paper, it just sounds like an academic exchange program, like a cool study abroad thing.
Sure, it's framed as an academic exchange, but look at the underlying mechanics here. The adults in her sphere, these professors and administrators, they recognize that what Erin is seeing isn't a hallucination, it's the trace of ancient magic.
This primordial, super volatile force.
Exactly. A force that the mainstream wizarding world has entirely forgotten about. The moment she exhibits this ability, she ceases to be a student in their eyes. She becomes a vessel.
Wow. Just an instrument.
Right. They uproot her from her country, her support system, her familiar curriculum, and her house. I mean, she gets resorted into Gryffindor at Hogwarts.
Just throwing her whole identity into a blender.
All to serve as this living, breathing metal detector for a lost magical power.
It's incredibly dark when you frame it that way. Professor Eleazar Fig takes her under his wing at Hogwarts, primarily because his late wife, Miriam, was obsessed with this magic. It's like Erin is just a walking extension of Miriam's unfinished thesis.
She really is.
Think about that for a second, learner. Have you ever had a unique talent that felt more like a burden than a gift? Imagine being naturally gifted at something like perfect pitch, but instead of getting to explore it on your own terms, you are instantly drafted into a high-stakes, international intelligence operation.
Your gift instantly becomes a massive burden, and the friction of that burden is immediate. I mean, the text literally states that her journey to Hogwarts was immediately fraught with peril.
Yeah, let's unpack fraught with peril, because that's putting it lightly. She is attacked by a literal dragon on her very first day.
Day one.
Day one. She's a transfer student who presumably just wants to get her class schedule and figure out where the Gryffindor common room is, and a dragon rips her carriage apart midair.
It's a terrifying introduction to a new continent.
And if the symmetry of the text is to be believed, by the end of her 5th year, she is fighting a goblin who was literally turned into a dragon underneath the school. How does the human brain, let alone a 15-year-old's brain, process that sheer volume of violence and trauma?
The harsh reality is that she doesn't process it. She compartmentalizes it in order to survive. And honestly, the adults around her facilitate that compartmentalization. Just consider the keepers.
Right, the 4 keepers in the map chamber. Percival Rackham, Charles Rickwood, Niamh Fitzgerald, and Sam Bakar. The text paints them as these noble ancient guardians, right? They set up these trials to ensure that anyone wielding this ancient magic is worthy.
I would strongly argue against their nobility. Let's really look at the psychology of the keepers. These are echoes, paintings, and memories of ancient wizards who hoarded a power they couldn't control.
Yeah, they messed up big time.
Huge time. So they created this elaborate, highly dangerous obstacle course to test the moral superiority of whoever found their secrets. But functionally, what are they actually doing?
Hazing a teenager.
Basically. They are forcing a 15-year-old girl to navigate lethal puzzles and fight ancient guardians, all while she is actively being hunted by a ruthless goblin rebellion.
I completely agree. It's a massive abdication of responsibility. They played around with a power that could alter the fabric of reality, couldn't handle it, locked it away, and then set up a system that essentially says, we will only help you if you prove you're better than we were. And if you die trying, oh well.
It's deeply unfair to her.
And meanwhile, outside the castle walls, she's being hunted by Ranrock and Victor Rookwood.
Right, let's examine that alliance because it reveals the socio-political powder keg that Erin was just tossed into. You have Ranrock, who is a goblin extremist leading a rebellion.
We should be clear here, historically, goblin rebellions in the wizarding world are often rooted in legitimate grievances.
Oh, absolutely. Systemic marginalization, denial of wand rights, brutal economic suppression. We aren't taking sides on the politics of magical history here. We're just reporting what the source material indicates, that the goblins were an oppressed class.
Right, but Ranrock takes that legitimate historical grievance and twists it into apocalyptic revenge. He's trying to unearth this corrupted reservoir of ancient magic to just obliterate wizard kind.
And he aligns with Victor Rookwood, who is a dark wizard acting as a mercenary.
It's the worst of both worlds. You have the justified rage of an oppressed class weaponized by a fascist leader, and it's funded and supported by a corrupt member of the elite wizarding class.
It's a nightmare scenario, and the only thing standing between this alliance and a literal weapon of mass destruction is a no-Magi-born teenager from Massachusetts.
Which brings us to the climax beneath Hogwarts. Ranrock breaches the final repository of magic. He absorbs the corrupted ancient magic and physically transforms into a monstrous dragon.
It's a manifestation of pure, volatile destruction, and in the ensuing battle to stop him, Professor Fig dies.
Her mentor. Like literally the only anchor she had in this entire foreign country.
Yes. His death strips away her final layer of protection, emotionally speaking. She defeats Ranrock, but the core psychological pivot of Erin's entire life happens in the immediate aftermath of that fight.
Down in the cavern.
Exactly. Standing in that cavern, surrounded by the raw, pulsating energy of the ancient magic, she faces a choice. She could claim the power.
And she'd be invincible.
Right. She could force the wizarding world to recognize her, or even use it to fix the societal inequities that caused the rebellion in the first place.
But she doesn't. She chooses to contain it.
And mechanically, what does that actually mean? How do you contain a localized tear in the fabric of magical reality?
You can't exactly put a cork in it.
No, you have to act as a metaphysical dam. She internalizes the burden. She seals the repository, choosing to leave the magic untouched, and vows to keep it secret.
And what blows my mind is the absolute silence of it all. The text explicitly notes that the world remained entirely unaware of the catastrophe she averted.
Completely oblivious.
There's no parade. The Minister for Magic doesn't give her an Order of Merlin. She just goes to class the next day, sits in the Great Hall, and eats breakfast with classmates who have no idea she just stopped an apocalypse.
It's staggering isolation.
She becomes the final, silent guardian of a power that could, as the text says, mend or mar the very foundations of magic.
And, the burden of that silence is arguably far heavier than the magic itself. It requires a profound, lifelong isolation. She possesses a truth about the fundamental nature of magic that she can never, ever share with anyone.
And we see how that plays out in the next phase of her life. She graduates, returns to America for a while, but eventually settles down back in Britain and marries a half-blood wizard named Nicholas Alexander Collins.
Right, they have a family.
They do. But she dies at the age of 50. The text says she died of natural causes, but come on. 50 is incredibly young for a witch. Witches and wizards live way past 100 normally.
Oh, absolutely. We really have to look at the biological and spiritual cost of what she did in that cavern. Like we discussed, containing ancient magic isn't just a physical act of closing a door. It's a continuous, exhausting spiritual exertion.
It drains you.
Acting as a human dam for a reservoir of volatile, world-ending magic will inevitably degrade a mortal vessel. Her life force was likely eroded by the sheer proximity to and responsibility for that containment.
So she dies at 50. But here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the mechanics of magic and the sheer force of human will collide in the most bizarre way. She dies, but she refuses to move on.
She rejects death.
Yeah. She gives up her afterlife. She chooses to become a phantom, hauling her spirit back to Hogwarts as a ghost, simply to haunt the halls and wait.
This is such a critical point of analysis. Let's look at the established mechanics of ghosts in magical lore for a second. Ghosts are imprints of departed souls, right? They usually remain behind due to a profound fear of death, an obsession with the material world, or some lingering, paralyzing regret.
Right, like Nearly Headless Nick or the Gray Lady.
Exactly, and they are, by definition, static. They cannot learn, they cannot grow, and crucially, they cannot physically interact with the world in a meaningful way.
Exactly. If she's a ghost, she's intangible. She can't hold a wand. She can't cast a protective enchantment. So how is an intangible phantom supposed to act as a guardian against dark wizards?
It seems counterintuitive.
Right. If another Ranrock comes along, what is a ghost going to do? Fly through him and give him a slight chill. Is this actually a brilliant tactical move, or is it just the ultimate control freak complex?
Well, it's a phenomenal question. But if we look at the mechanics of, say, the secret keeper charm, the Fidelius charm, it relies on hiding a secret within a living soul.
Okay, tracking with you.
But what if the repository's protection isn't purely physical? What if Erin bound the knowledge of the repository's location and access points to her very essence? By becoming a ghost, she removes herself from the cycle of mortal vulnerability.
Oh, wow.
Right. A dark wizard can torture a living human for information using the Cruciatus Curse. You cannot torture a ghost. You cannot use legilimency to read the mind of a ghost. She basically became a metaphysical Faraday cage around the secret.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. She looked at the keepers, these 4 powerful wizards who failed to protect the magic in life and left behind a dangerous mess in death, and she just decided she wouldn't trust their system.
She didn't trust anyone.
She didn't trust the ministry. She didn't trust other wizards. She trusted only her own eternal vigilance. But she isn't just guarding it. She's waiting.
Yes. She is biding her time. She knows that the ability to see and command ancient magic is incredibly rare, but she theorizes that it might echo down her bloodline eventually. She is waiting for an heir.
Which sets up this terrifying generational time bomb. Erin makes a unilateral decision for her descendants that they don't even know about.
It's a massive burden to pass down silently.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand exactly who she is waiting for and the psychological soil that this heir will grow up in, we have to trace this bloodline forward. We skip a few generations to the mid-20th century. We move from a no-man's-born hero forged in battle to the gilded cage of pureblood aristocracy.
The contrast is jarring, honestly. We are introduced to Katherine Rose Collins, née Taylor. Katherine is a descendant by marriage. She marries into the Collins line. In the text, she's 40 years old, a pureblood witch, a Ravenclaw, and a healer at St. Mungo's Hospital.
And Katherine's childhood is the polar opposite of Erin's. Erin was an anomaly in a non-magical home. Katherine is born into the absolute pinnacle of pureblood society in London. Her parents, Eleanor and Edward Taylor, made a massive fortune in potion cures. They have a manor. They have immense wealth.
But wealth in these ancient magical families often comes paired with just suffocating expectations. Katherine's father, Edward, is somewhat lenient, but her mother, Eleanor, is an absolute architect of psychological pressure.
Yeah, Eleanor is intense.
She demands absolute perfection.
And we see the mechanics of this conditional love play out when Katherine is just 7 years old. The text details this incident where Katherine exhibits her first sign of magic by making a book fly down from a high shelf in the drawing room.
Now, mechanically speaking, intentional, targeted, wandless magic at age 7 is a massive display of raw magical potential.
It is extraordinary. Edward is appropriately impressed. But Eleanor's reaction is chilling. She feels her daughter's first magical display could have been, quote, more remarkable.
It's heartbreaking.
What does Eleanor actually want? What exactly constitutes perfect magic to a pure-blood mother like that? If making a book fly off a shelf at age 7 isn't good enough, what is? Did she expect a 7-year-old to transfigure the grand piano into a flock of swans? It's not about the magic at all, is it?
No, not at all. It's entirely about control. Eleanor's reaction is a calculated withholding of affection. In aristocratic pure-blood circles, magic isn't a wonder, it's a metric of status.
It's currency.
Exactly. Eleanor isn't critiquing the spell. She is establishing a baseline where Katherine will never be inherently enough. The text explicitly states that Katherine learned to suppress her true, highly creative self. She learned to act exactly as Eleanor expected, even when her mother wasn't in the room.
The internal policing. The panopticon of the mother's disappointment. Have you ever found yourself masking your true personality just to meet the exhausting expectations of a mentor or a family member? It's draining. The text notes how profoundly lonely she was, sitting in this massive manor with every book she could ever desire, but completely isolated.
And then she goes to Hogwarts.
Right, and is sorted into Ravenclaw.
Which is fascinating because Ravenclaw values intellect, curiosity, and wit. You would think this would be her liberation, right? A place where she can finally breathe. But how does she actually utilize her house traits?
She weaponizes the library. Instead of flourishing socially, she remains highly studious and isolated. While her housemates are socializing in the common room, she buries herself in textbooks.
She uses intellect as a shield against emotional vulnerability. If she is the perfect student, if she masters every single text, she creates a buffer of competence around herself.
That makes a lot of sense.
She knows she can't master her mother's affection. Her father writes weekly, but Eleanor rarely even bothers, so she masters her coursework instead. It's a survival mechanism based entirely on emotional suppression.
But then, in her 5th year, she meets a boy who acts as a complete system override. Anthony Joseph Collins, a Gryffindor.
Anthony is the psychological grounding wire Katherine didn't know she needed.
I love that analogy. Explain the mechanics of that.
Well, Katherine is walking around completely overloaded by the high-voltage expectations of her mother. She is humming with repressed anxiety and forced perfectionism.
She's totally rigid.
Right. And Anthony, as a free-spirited, highly expressive Gryffindor, provides a safe place for all that anxious energy to discharge. The text notes that as their friendship grew, he gradually broke down her emotional walls. He didn't demand perfection from her, he just demanded authenticity.
So what does this all mean? It means Anthony was the son that thawed the ice Eleanor built around Katherine. He gave her the unconditional acceptance she was starved of. It's a really beautiful progression. They graduate, they get married, and they build a life in Godric's Hollow.
A very intentional choice of location, too.
Yeah. They have a daughter, Agatha. Anthony becomes a curse breaker for the ministry, and Katherine becomes a healer. She literally becomes the warm, nurturing presence she was denied in her own childhood.
It is a deliberate severing of the generational trauma from her mother. Katherine chooses to parent with warmth. But, the peril of loving someone who breaks curses for a living is that eventually a curse breaks back.
Yeah. Anthony dies in a work-related incident at the age of 30.
30 years old. Katherine is left a widow at 30 with a 10-year-old daughter.
Let's dive deep into the psychology of Katherine's grief, because her profession as a healer at St. Mungo's adds a massive layer of complexity here. When the sun goes out, she's left entirely focused on keeping her daughter warm. But the text explicitly reveals that her biggest regret is her inability to successfully heal and save her husband.
We have to analyze the sociological landscape of wizarding healthcare to really get this. Think about the god complex inherently required to be a magical healer.
Right, because magic fixes almost everything.
Exactly. You work in a facility where you can literally regrow shattered bones overnight with Skelligro, cure magical maladies, and reverse transfigurations. You defy biology on a daily basis.
So when your husband is hit by a curse, and you bring all that reality-bending medical knowledge to bear, and he still dies, the survivor's guilt isn't just, I lost him.
No.
The guilt is, I possess the power to defy death for strangers, and I still failed the only person who actually mattered.
Exactly. That fundamentally changes the psychology of her grief. You have to wonder, is her continued intense dedication to St. Mungo's purely altruistic? Or is it a desperate, subconscious attempt to balance a cosmic scale that can never actually be balanced?
Like every patient she saves is a proxy for Anthony.
Yes, a coping mechanism fueled by intense survivor's guilt.
The emotional devastation is so clear in a letter Katherine wrote to Anthony after his death. The text provides this raw excerpt where she says, "They say time softens the blow, but I find I miss you more with every breath I take." But it's the specific mundane details she fixates on that really illustrate the mechanics of grief.
It's always the small things.
Yeah, she writes, "I miss the way you made the tea, always a bit stronger than mine."
It's the domestic intimacy. Grief doesn't just mourn the grand concepts of love. It mourns the daily rituals. The strong tea is a physical manifestation of his presence in their house.
And she talks about the sheer exhaustion of single motherhood. She says, "Some days the weight of raising her alone feels too heavy to bear. Please, wherever you are, send me a bit of your courage." She is a Ravenclaw, literally begging the ghost of her Gryffindor husband for his defining trait, just so she can survive the day for their daughter.
It's devastating, and look at how she signs off the letter. Until we meet again in the clearing at the end of the path.
It implies she views the rest of her life as a trudge, a path she is obligated to walk until it ends and she can see him again. All of her warmth, all of her focus is now hyper-concentrated on Agatha. And this brings us to the physical setting where Agatha is being raised. We need to talk about Godric's Hollow.
Yes, because geography dictates psychology.
Godric's Hollow is an incredibly complex sociological setting. The text describes it as a historic village in the West Country of England, where muggles and magical folks live side by side, entirely under the radar due to the statute of secrecy.
It sounds charming on the surface, right? A quaint square, a little post office, a pub. But beneath that, it is quite literally a monument to magical sacrifice.
Right. It's the birthplace of Godric Gryffindor. The center of town features a war memorial that looks normal to muggles, but for anyone with magic, it transforms into a statue of James, Lily, and Harry Potter, honoring their sacrifice in 1981.
It is a village steeped in the invisible weight of history. Think about the psychological impact on a developing child. Agatha and Katherine live in the cottage where their family was whole, but every time they step out their front door to buy bread, they walk past a magical monument to murdered parents.
They walk past a graveyard filled with ancient wizarding lineages. They're living in a cottage surrounded by happy memories of Anthony, but they step outside into a town that is literally famous for monuments to dead wizards.
Geography shapes grief. They are living in a sanctuary, but that sanctuary is a graveyard. Death, legacy, and sacrifice are the literal architecture of her hometown. How does a child process that environment when she is already dealing with the traumatic loss of her own father?
It creates an Agatha.
Exactly. It perfectly mirrors the Collins family's overarching narrative of dealing with invisible historical weight.
So let's introduce the final point of this generational line. Agatha Erin Collins, 18 years old, ginger hair, light blue eyes, pale freckled skin. And notably, she breaks the house mold. She isn't a Gryffindor like her father or a Ravenclaw like her mother. She is a Hufflepuff.
Which tells us everything about her core values and her coping mechanisms. Hufflepuffs value hard work, justice, and above all else, fierce loyalty. But the text provides a really nuanced look at the shadow side of those traits.
Yeah, Agatha is described as dreamy, sensitive, and profoundly insecure.
The document specifically notes her primary defense mechanism. She has a habit of isolating herself whenever she thinks other people don't want her around. She just withdraws it to herself.
If we trace that behavior back to its origin, it perfectly aligns with the abandonment wound she suffered at age 10. Her father, the vibrant, expressive center of their family, went to work and never came back.
Even though it obviously wasn't intentional, the psychological takeaway for a 10-year-old is the people you love the most can disappear without warning.
Therefore, if I remove myself from the equation first, if I isolate myself, I can't be abandoned again. But despite that insecurity, she is ferociously protective of her mother. We see this in a letter Agatha writes to Katherine.
It's a very revealing letter.
She calls her mum my rock. She writes, "You're a brilliant witch and the best mummy in the whole world. I want to be just like you when I grow up." But then she adds this line, "Mom, don't forget that Dad will always be with us, tucked away in our hearts."
That line reveals a devastating dynamic. Agatha is acting as the emotional caretaker for her mother. She recognizes the profound, unresolved grief in Katherine, and this insecure teenager is trying to offer reassurance.
Reassuring the parent.
Right. She is steeped in love, absolutely, but it is a love heavily mortgaged by grief and a terror of further loss.
Which makes the central revelation of this entire document so incredibly jarring. Agatha Erin Collins, this shy, self-isolating, grieving Hufflepuff who just wants to keep her mother from being sad, is the thrice great-granddaughter of Erin Rose Collins, and she is the one.
After a century of dormant bloodlines, Agatha has inherited the rare ability to see and command ancient magic.
Erin was a Gryffindor, forged in the fires of a goblin rebellion. Agatha is a shy, self-isolating Hufflepuff, forged in the quiet grief of losing her dad. And yet she's the one holding the keys to the universe.
This raises an important question. The magic skipped Katherine entirely. It skipped Anthony. Why did it manifest in Agatha? Does the inheritance of ancient magic require a specific emotional resonance?
Oh, that's interesting.
Erin was an outsider thrust into trauma. Agatha is an insider suffocating under the quiet trauma of grief. Both are distinctly isolated, just in different ways.
But the contrast in how they might handle this power is the massive question here. Like I said, Erin was a Gryffindor. Even though she was a no-mage-born kid terrified by a new world, she had an innate, decisive bravery. When she saw this apocalyptic magic, she made the executive, warrior-like decision to build a dam and become a ghost to guard it. She approached it as a tactical threat.
Exactly. Erin was driven by duty and containment. But Agatha is a Hufflepuff, forged in the quiet, agonizing grief of a shattered family. She lacks self-assurance. She withdraws when pressured.
Learner, I want you to consider how different personalities handle immense, unexpected responsibilities. If you hand the keys to the universe to a brave, decisive warrior, you get a guardian. But mechanically, what happens when you hand those same keys, a power that the text says can mend or mar, to a sensitive, highly empathetic teenager who carries a massive abandonment wound?
It creates a terrifying vulnerability. Ancient magic has the power to mend. It can alter reality. If you are an 18-year-old girl whose entire psychological architecture is built around the trauma of losing your father, and you suddenly discover you hold a power that defies the laws of nature, could you resist the temptation to use it?
Wait, is this suggesting she might try to use the corrupted reservoir to bring Anthony back?
I am suggesting that a Hufflepuff's ultimate loyalty is to their loved ones. A Gryffindor guards the realm. A Hufflepuff tends to the wounded. Agatha might look at this immense volatile magic not as a weapon to be locked away, but as a potential cure for her mother's endless sorrow.
Oh, wow.
And attempting to heal the unhealable with corrupted magic is exactly how you accidentally unleash destruction.
That is a chilling thought. She wouldn't be doing it out of malice or a desire for power like Ranrock did. She would do it out of pure, desperate empathy.
Which is arguably much harder to defend against. But you know, the most unsettling part of this entire scenario is the lack of autonomy Agatha actually has in this process.
Right, because this inheritance isn't just a genetic lottery. It is practically orchestrated.
Totally.
Let's pull the lens back and recap the sheer weight of what we've uncovered in this text.
Yeah.
We started in 1875 with Erin, a no-match-born teenager who survives a war, binds her very soul to Hogwarts, and deliberately transforms herself into a metaphysical lock to protect a world-ending secret.
Right.
Then we traced the bloodline through the gilded, emotionally barren halls of Katherine's pure blood upbringing, watched her find liberation with Anthony only to have it ripped away, leaving her to raise a child in a village literally built on monuments to dead heroes.
And all of that historical gravity, all of that unresolved grief and magical potency lands squarely on the shoulders of Agatha, an 18-year-old girl who just wants to feel secure. And we are left with a final lingering thought to mull over regarding the nature of destiny versus free will. Picture the inevitable moment Agatha returns to Hogwarts. She is an insecure young woman trying to navigate her trauma and find a small, safe place in the world.
But waiting for her in those corridors
Is the literal ghost of her thrice great-grandmother. Erin has been drifting through those halls, refusing the peace of death, biding her time for over a century for this exact moment. She's been waiting to hand Agatha the most dangerous, isolating, magical burden in existence.
So how much free will does Agatha actually possess? When the ghost of your ancestor is quite literally haunting your school, waiting to draft you into a century-old secret war, do your choices even matter? Is she an autonomous human being, or was she just born to be the replacement lock on a door built 100 years before she even existed?
The genealogical map is broken. It isn't a tree. It is a trap set by a ghost waiting for a girl who doesn't know she's already been caught.
A web of ghosts, grief, and power. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly dense deep dive into the source material. We hope this exploration of the Collins family encourages you to look a little closer at the hidden depths, the invisible inheritances, and the untold stories that might be quietly shaping the world around you. Until next time, keep digging.